Hi guys and welcome to TechteamGB. In this video we're building this rather nice, rather expensive, but also rather good looking gaming PC, and we're going to run you through how to build it, what specs we have, and its performance as well. Let's start off with the specs. The headline parts here are the Ryzen 2700X and the RTX 2080 Ti from Zotac. We do also have a whole load of other parts, as you'd expect, starting with the motherboard, which is an ASRock X470 Ti Ultimate. We also have 16 gigs of RAM. This one is Adata Spectrix RAM. We also have a Fractal Design S24 as the cooler with a load of Lian Li BR digital fans, including on the cooler itself. We also have a Fantex Enthoo Evolve X, which is an utterly beautiful case, and a 500 gig Adata SX8200 Pro NVMe SSD. And if you're buying this build yourself or building this yourself, I'd recommend a 2 to 4 terabyte hard drive, something like a Seagate Barracuda to throw in there as well. And we also have a Corsair HX 850 watt power supply. So now you know the parts, let's get into building it. The first thing is putting the CPU into the socket on the motherboard. This is really simple. All you do is line up the little gold triangle with a little triangle on the motherboard, lift up the arm on the socket and gently place the CPU in. And once it's in place and sat flush, all you do is put that arm back down again and there you go, you've installed a CPU. Next up, I would install the RAM. This is pretty simple. All you do is work out which slots you want to use. In this case, we're going for the second from the CPU and the fourth from the CPU, as those are the recommended slots to use in a dual channel configuration, which is what we have here. And we're gonna just line up the slot on the RAM, make sure the tabs on both ends of the slots are open, and then place them down in and click them in place, and do that for the second stick, and there you go too. Installing the M.2 SSD in this board is actually pretty easy as well. There's two screws that cover the M.2 slot just above the top PCIe slot, or just below your CPU sockets. So when you take those two screws off and take the heatsink off, then you can install the M.2 SSD slightly at an angle, pushing it into the slot and then pushing it down so it's flush with the motherboard, and screwing in the rather small screw at the back, taking off the protective film on the sort of heat pad on the bottom of the, well, heat sink, and then putting that down on and screwing it back in. We do also want to prep the CPU socket area for putting our cooler on. This cooler actually uses the built-in backplate, but does have its own standoffs that you need to install, so you're going to remove the default mounting bracket that's on the front of the board, making sure that the backplate stays on the motherboard, and then screw in all 4 of your standoffs and you're ready to go. You'll then need to prep the case and get it ready to put all your stuff in. For the Enthoo Evolve X, you basically just take off almost every panel you can see and you're ready to go. They all generally just either pull or slide off, so no worries there. The first thing I would recommend you do is install the power supply. You actually do this by removing 2 screws on the back of the mounting bracket, screwing the 4 screws into the power supply to hold that bracket to the power supply, and then sliding the power supply with its cables first into the chassis and kind of pull the cables out to the side for ease of installation. I'd also recommend with this case that you install the power supply with its fan facing down, as that's where the airflow will come in for that, and it also has a dust filter down there too. If, like this build, you're using a all-in-one water cooler or any type of water cooling, you'll want to install that radiator on the radiator bracket that goes on the top of the case before you then get to try and install it. So we're going to do that. We're also going to then look at installing the motherboard into the case. You'll need to install your rear I/O shield first, which, depending on what motherboard you have, might come pre-attached to your motherboard these days, but if it's more old school like this ASRock board, then you'll need to generally cut your fingers a few times trying to push it into the hole, and once it's snapped in place, you can then look at putting your motherboard in. Now, this case comes with all of the standoffs for your motherboard pre-installed in the standard ATX form factor, but if you're using a different board or it needs some sort of different standoff layout, then make sure you move the standoffs to the slots or the places that it needs to be so that you can mount your motherboard. In this case, with a standard ATX motherboard, you're looking at 9 standoffs, 3 on the top, 3 in the middle, and 3 down the bottom. So when you put your motherboard in, screw those 9 in, and then you're good to go. For ease of installation, before we go too far, we're going to install a lot of the different power connectors now. We're going to look at the 8-pin, which is in the top left-hand side of your motherboard. We're also going to look at the 24-pin, the USB 3 header, and the USB 3.1 header, which are all basically just in the sort of center right of your board. And your lower stuff like your front panel audio and your front panel power switch, which is all this has. Once that's all good, you're then going to want to install your CPU cooler. You want to put a bit of thermal paste on first if your CPU cooler doesn't come with it pre-applied. If it does come with it pre-applied, don't worry about any extra thermal paste, just use the stuff that's on there unless you want to use your own, in which case make sure you clean off the stuff on your CPU cooler before you use it. But either way, make sure you've got a little bit of a blob of CPU paste on there, and then put your cooler on, screw your 4 mounting screws in, plug in the fan connector, and then mount the radiator back into the normal place at the top. You're also going to want to install your graphics card. This is really very simple. All you do is push the tab on the motherboard down that would normally hold the card in place, remove the 2 screws and blanking plates that go at the back of the case that line up with the slot that you're wanting to install in and the one below, because most cards are dual slot. If you have only one slot, you only need to remove one. Fairly self-explanatory. And then place the card in, make sure it clicks in place, screw your 2 screws back in, and make sure you connect your graphics card's power connector inside. In this case, it's 2 8-pins because the 2080 Ti is a bit of a power hog, and then you're all good to go. You will likely want to do a little bit of cable management, although the Phanteks Enthoo X has 2 massive cable covers, so even if you don't do much cable management, you can still make the back of your case look absolutely pristine, so that's definitely handy. But I'd recommend you do a little bit so that you don't have too much extra wire inside your kind of main part of your case, and so that you still have decent airflow and all that good stuff. So now it's built, let's take a look at how well it performs. Unsurprisingly, this is a very impressive machine, and I was benchmarking here solely at 4K just to show you how impressive this thing is. So in terms of Battlefield 5 at 4K with DirectX 12 and Ultra settings, you're looking at 77 FPS average and a 1% lows or 99% lows of 70 FPS. When testing on PUBG, again at 4K, again on Ultra settings, you're looking at 93 FPS average and only a minimum of 61, which is incredibly impressive. Fortnite is also pretty good. You're looking at, again on Epic settings with multi-core rendering, I might add, 86 FPS with, again, a minimum of only 65, which is pretty great to see. In terms of Apex Legends, which is obviously a bit of a newer title, although using a bit of an older engine, you're looking at 99 FPS on almost maxed settings, again at 4K, and again a really good minimum of 61 FPS as well, so very smooth, very playable, and very enjoyable. Now, to slightly preempt some of the comments, and let's face it, most people don't watch the video and just comment anyway, so there's probably already a lot of comments down there talking about this, but the new generation or 3rd generation of Ryzen CPUs are soon to be upon us, and so it could be a good idea to wait a little bit and potentially pick up a newer X570 motherboard and a newer 3000 series Ryzen chip if you wanted the best performance that you can possibly get. But if you're willing to buy this now and upgrade later, hypothetically anyway, this board, this X470 board, and in theory a load of other X470 boards should either already have BIOS updates to support those newer chips, or should be getting them. And as long as you're not using one of the newer 12-core chips that are said to be coming out, this should actually be a very impressive and very upgradable system if you choose to buy now and upgrade later. You can, of course, upgrade your motherboard if you wanted to. That's certainly an option, and the rest of these parts will all still work with your newer boards, so that is all good, but it's something to mention just to kind of clear the air. But either way, if you're willing to spend about £3,000 on a gaming PC, it turns out you get some rather awesome stuff and a rather good looking PC to go with it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the build in the comments down below, and of course your thoughts on the new Ryzen 3000 series chips as well. If you want to pick up any of the parts that I've used in this build, or you want to make this build yourself, then feel free to take a look at the links in the description down below. Those should hopefully be local Amazon links where you can see pricing when and where you watch this. Of course, if you want to support the channel and keep me making these videos on a Monday, Wednesday, and Friday basis, then make sure you are both following me on Twitter and check out the Discord as well, because often YouTube doesn't really promote these videos there, so feel free to take a look at that. There's also a load of other links in the description down below from Amazon and OverclockersUK affiliate links, which don't cost you anything to use, but massively help me out when you do. Or there's also stuff like Patreon if you want to support me directly and get cool rewards for doing so. You can pick up merch with the t-shirts that I'm wearing under this hoodie, or hoodies as well, and you can also check out private internet access, which is a great and cheap VPN again, or Humble Bundle for cheap games that support charities too. There's also a load of other videos over there if you want to check them out, and make sure you hit that subscribe button with a bell notification icon to be notified of new videos. Otherwise, that is pretty much it. If you've got any questions, leave us in the comments down below, and we'll see you all in the next video.